basic pie dough. And so what I have is I have my flour measured out with some salt. I have my shortening. It has been sitting in the fridge until I was ready to start filming. And then I have some water, okay? So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you wanna cut in the shortening, the fat source, with your flour and your salt. I don't have a pastry cutter at home, and so I'm just gonna be using 2 knives, and you just do like a sawing motion. So you wanna come closer. So this is 2/3 of a cup of shortening. And remember, we wanna use shortening because the melting point is higher, which means we can work with the pie dough a little bit longer than we could if we were just using butter, okay? So from here, I'm just going to make cutting motions. And this definitely takes longer than if I had a pastry cutter, but I don't have one. So this is really just to show you that it's okay if you don't have one. And you just kind of keep making cutting motions until these are all the size of small peas. Okay, so you can see that's a really, really big chunk. I'm gonna keep going until, again, they're the size of small peas. So you can pause. Shortening cut in with the flour, it looks like this. Okay, so you can see they're very small chunks now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding in my water. My water is ice cold. I just had it in the fridge until I was ready to use it. And I'm going to be adding it in 1 tablespoon at a time. Okay, so I have a cup measured out. I don't use the whole cup, but that's a little thing. A cup of depends. It's pretty much just like how you make your flour. You just spoon it in, and then you level it like you're supposed to. You just dump it in. Also just like the humidity and all these things that can affect it. So, you know, I might use the whole cup, I might not, honestly, every time I make it. So I just have a tablespoon. Start, and then I just mix so you can come closer so you can see. You know, those first 2 tablespoons, you can't even tell that I added them. And what I'm looking for is that the dough is it's just gonna come together in a ball. It's gonna look still a little crumbly, and that's okay, but it should not look wet by any means by the time you're done. And again, I don't wanna work with this too long because the longer I have this out, the longer that shortening wants to start melting in with the dry ingredients. At first, if you want to do 2 tablespoons at a time, that'll be fine. But once you get kind of down to a half cup, then just make sure you're adding it 1 tablespoon at a time. Like, it's crazy that, whoops, that 1 tablespoon could. Anyway, that 1 tablespoon can kind of make or break your dough, but it can. So you can see in the middle there, it's starting to come together. All right, so I've gone ahead and added my water to the point that is good and that your pie dough will be good. So you can see I still have about a 1/4 cup of water left. So what I'm looking for and how you know you're kind of done, you know, it's, yeah, it looks crumbly, okay? But you know, I can touch this and it's not coming off on my hands. Also, really on the bottom, there's no more like little pieces. So then from here, what I do is I just kind of form it in one big ball inside the bowl, making sure it's getting all the way down on the bottom. And I'm not like kneading it, I'm just kind of bringing it into a ball, okay? Now this is actually 2, so we're just gonna go ahead and split this in half. That looks about good. And I'm just gonna pat this real quick. Again, you didn't see me add any extra flour and I barely have any dough on my hands. Doesn't have to look perfect, doesn't have to look all smooth by any means, okay? But if you look really close, this is how you know you've done it right. So if you can come really close, if you can see, hopefully you guys can see this, you know, like right there, like that shortening, flour, shortening, flour, shortening. You can see the different colors throughout here, okay? Here's kind of a good example, a little darker, a little lighter. So that's the shortening kind of being melded in with the flour. So then what you do is you just take a disc of dough, kind of pat it down, and then just wrap it in saran wrap until you're ready to use it, okay? So when you have it in the saran wrap, you want to put it in the fridge for at least a couple hours because we've worked with it quite a bit. That shortening is starting to kind of meld into it, and we want to keep those chunks separate, okay? So we want to throw it in the fridge overnight, at least for 2 hours, but overnight if you want. If you want to freeze it, you can, but we're going to be using it pretty soon, so you don't have to freeze it, but it's up to you. If you're going to freeze it, then I would put it in a freezer bag, and you should have 2 sections of dough like this. Okay. All right, so our pie dough has been refrigerating. I've had it in the fridge for about 5 hours, and I'm going to start rolling it up. So when I feel it, you know, it's kind of moist, but it's not like leaving any residue on my hand. So I've dusted my table with flour. I'm just going to plop my dough on there, and I'm going to dust my rolling pin with flour. And I like to sprinkle a little bit on my pie dough as well. So when you roll it out, get this out of the way. When you roll it out, I like to just kind of pound the dough a little bit to flatten it, just to make it a little easier. And then I just roll it out. So if you want to come closer, you're actually going to be able to see this marbling between, you know, like the lighter colors are those pockets of shortening that are still together, and then the darker colors is really that, that flour. So I'm just going to roll this out, and I like to check to make sure, you know, that it's not sticking. And if it starts to stick, I just want to throw some more flour under there. So by carefully lifting it up, I'm getting some more flour under there. And then I'm just going to keep rolling it out. Now, you only really need to roll it out as big as the pie pan that you are using, okay? Sometimes it likes to kind of stick on the rolling pin, so you can reflour that a little bit. But how it's kind of rolling out with no cracks like that, that's exactly what we want pie dough to look like. So I'm going to kind of take my pie pan and see if it fits around. I'm a little short here and here, so I'm going to keep rolling it out. I'm going to just check to make sure it's not sticking underneath. I'm going to be really careful. A little trick you can do is you can start your rolling pin on one end and just kind of fold this over, and then that way that allows you to get that flour right underneath. And that's actually how I'm going to transfer my dough to my pie pan. Alright, so that's pretty good. Now if you get it in the pie pan and it rips a little bit, that's okay. We'll just patch it. So what, again, my little trick is I just have floured my rolling pin, and I'm just going to start from one end, and I just roll this up so that way the entire pie crust is on my rolling pin. So then I can bring my pie pan over and I just unroll it. So I'm not trying to like balance it on my hands or anything, and it's super duper easy. So then what I do is kind of just, you just kind of play with the pie crust a little bit, and you want to make sure it's tucked in to all sides. Okay, and you can see like right here, I have a little gap, and I obviously have a lot extra right here. So, you know what you can do? You just cover it, just like that. Super easy, okay? So tomorrow we're gonna talk about fillings. So the different fillings you can put in a pie, and then on Thursday, I'm gonna show you like the different decorating you can do to the edges of a pie. We call that fluting, and even the top of a pie.